You feel it before you can name it, a pull, a heat that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with chemistry. And then, just as quickly, you push it down, because you are at work, or on a train, or scrolling a screen surrounded by strangers. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors felt that exact same pull, the same heat, the same chemistry firing in the same ancient circuits. But they had no locked doors, no privacy, no apps, no screens to hide behind. They had a body that wanted a band of maybe 30 people who knew everything about them and almost nowhere to disappear. So, what did they actually do with it? The desire you are quietly managing right now is not modern. It is one of the oldest forces in your body, and the way humans handled it shaped families, friendships, and the entire structure of the groups your species survived in. To understand it, you have to start where the feeling itself begins. In your brain. The anthropologist Helen Fisher spent decades studying what actually happens inside the human mind when it wants. She put people in brain scanners and watched, and she concluded that what you casually call attraction is not one thing at all. It is 3 separate systems, layered on top of each other, each with its own chemistry and its own job. The first is lust, raw, urgent, driven by sex hormones. It does not care who, it just wants. The second is attraction, the obsessive, dizzy focus on one specific person, flooded with dopamine, the same chemical that lights up for a reward. The third is attachment, the calm, deep bond that keeps 2 people side by side for years, held together by hormones released through closeness and touch. Here is what matters. These 3 systems do not always point at the same person. Lust can pull one way while attachment holds you somewhere else. Your ancestors did not invent this tension. They inherited it exactly as you did, and they had to build a whole way of living around it. So let's go back. Way back. For most of the animal kingdom, desire runs on a schedule. Many female mammals have what biologists call estrus, a visible fertile window often advertised with swelling, scent, or color. The signal is loud. Mating happens, then the window closes, and the wanting switches off until next time. Humans broke that rule completely. Somewhere in your evolutionary past, your species lost the obvious signal. This is called concealed ovulation, and it means exactly what it sounds like. A human female's fertile days are hidden even from herself in the ancient world. There is no flashing sign, and alongside that, human desire stopped switching off. It became year-round, almost constant, untethered from any single fertile moment. Think about how strange that is. Most animals want only when reproduction is possible. Humans want, more or less, always. The primatologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has argued that this changed everything about how early human groups worked. When desire is hidden and constant, sex stops being only about making babies. It becomes social. It becomes a tool for bonding, for forming alliances, for holding a fragile group of people together through hard seasons. You don't even have to imagine what that looks like, because a close cousin shows it to us right now. The primatologist Frans de Waal spent years observing bonobos, one of the 2 apes most closely related to you. When tension rises in a bonobo group, when there is conflict over food or status, they don't always fight, they have sex. Brief, casual, social. It diffuses the tension and resets the peace. No one is claiming your ancestors lived exactly like bonobos, but the lesson is real. In a small group where everyone depends on everyone, desire is not only a private hunger, it is part of the social glue. Which brings us to the question you are actually asking. With no privacy and no walls, how did real ancient humans handle the everyday, ordinary feeling of wanting someone? The answer is uncomfortable for a modern mind. They handled it in the open. In a hunter-gatherer band, there are no secrets. The group is too small. Everyone sleeps within sight of everyone else, around the same fire, under the same sky. Who likes whom? Who is drifting toward whom? Who is unhappy with their partner? None of it is hidden, because it cannot be. Desire was not a shameful secret locked inside one's skull. It was a visible, communal fact, watched and managed by the entire group. And the group cared deeply about getting it right, because in a tiny band, a jealous rivalry could split the whole community and get people killed. So let's reconstruct a single ordinary evening 300 centuries ago. The light is going orange. The day's hunting and gathering is done. A small band, maybe 24 people, gathers around a fire. There is food and talk and the low hum of voices that the anthropologist Polly Wiesner documented among the Jew Howanzi people of the Kalahari, where she found that the majority of nighttime firelight conversation was not about hunting or work at all. It was about people. Who did what? Who feels what? Who is with whom? This is the original social network. And inside it, two young people keep glancing at each other across the flames. There is no app to swipe, no message to send, no way to slide into anyone's anything. There is only proximity, reputation, and the watchful awareness of every elder, parent, and sibling around that fire. Courtship here is slow, public, and deeply social. You don't win a partner by hiding your feelings. You win one by being seen as useful, generous, skilled, and kind day after day in front of everyone who matters. Desire, in other words, was answerable to the group. Now here comes the part that turns the whole question on its head. You assume your ancestors needed strict rules to control all this wanting, and in one sense they did. Nearly every human society has rules about who you may and may not desire, but the deepest of those rules was not enforced by punishment at all. It was built into your biology, quietly, without anyone deciding it. It is called the Westermarck effect, named for the Finnish thinker Edvard Westermarck. The idea is simple and strange. Children who grow up in close physical contact during their earliest years tend to feel no sexual attraction to each other later in life. Not because of a law, because of a feeling that simply fails to appear. For a long time, this was just a theory. Then the anthropologist Arthur Wolf spent years studying marriage records in Taiwan, including a tradition where some families raised a future bride alongside their son from infancy. On paper, the perfect arranged match. In reality, those marriages had far higher rates of failure, unhappiness, and divorce. The two people had grown up like siblings. The desire never came. Sit with what that means. The single most important boundary around human desire, the one protecting the children in that small band from each other, was not a rule somebody had to teach. It was written into how your brain forms bonds in the first years of life. Your ancestors did not have to police it. Their own wiring did the work. The thing you think of as the most chaotic, uncontrollable force in your body turns out to have been, in its deepest layer, quietly self-regulating all along. And they did not treat it as something to be ashamed of either. Some of the very first art your species ever made was about exactly this. Carved more than 30,000 years ago from a piece of mammoth ivory, the figurine known as the Venus of Hohle Fels is one of the oldest depictions of a human being ever found. And it is unmistakably a body, exaggerated, sexual, fertile. Your ancestors took some of the first hours they ever spent making art, and they spent them carving desire into bone. This was not hidden, it was held up, marveled at, made permanent. So step back and look at the whole picture. Your ancestors lived with a desire system that ran constantly, with no off switch, in a world with no privacy at all. And they did not solve that with shame or secrecy. They solved it out loud. Through a community that watched, talked, teased, and steered. Through bonds formed in the open over months and years. Through biology that drew its own quiet boundaries. Through art that celebrated the body instead of hiding it. Now look at yourself. You carry that same ancient system. The 3 layers Helen Fisher mapped, lust and attraction and attachment, still fire in you exactly as they fired around that fire. But you run them in a world they were never built for. A world of strangers instead of a familiar band. Of endless novelty on a screen instead of 24 faces you have known your whole life. Of total privacy instead of total visibility. Your desire evolved to be managed by a community. You now manage it almost entirely alone. That is the strange weight you feel. Not that your wanting is broken, but that it is ancient, dropped into a setting it does not recognize, with none of the slow social scaffolding that once held it. Your ancestors were never meant to handle this feeling by themselves, and neither, really, are you. So the next time that heat rises and you quietly push it down, remember what it actually is. Not a flaw, not a modern weakness. The oldest fire your species ever carried, the one that built families, sealed friendships, and kept a fragile band of humans bonded through 300,000 years of nights. You feel it before you can name it. You always have. The heat is older than language, older than shame, older than you. It was never the problem to be solved. It was the thing that kept your ancestors alive.